Who was crazy until they were right all along? Everyone thought my neighbor Larry was losing it. The guy was retired from some engineering job and had way too much time on his hands. What made everyone think he was nuts was how obsessed he got with the pavement. He'd literally get on his hands and knees measuring tiny cracks with a ruler. My wife Emma would watch him from our kitchen window and shake her head. "That man needs a hobby," she'd say while making coffee. But Larry already had a hobby, documenting every single imperfection in our cul-de-sac. It got worse after the harsh winter we had 2 years ago. Larry started showing up with actual tools. He'd poke the ground with a metal rod, take soil samples in little plastic bags, and scribble notes like he was conducting some FBI investigation. The HOA president, Janet, got multiple complaints about his weird behavior, but Larry didn't care what anyone thought. He started going door to door with printouts and graphs, warning people about structural instability and underground erosion. Most neighbors just politely closed their doors after a few minutes of his rambling about soil displacement and drainage issues. The breaking point came when Larry started putting bright orange cones around certain parking spots at the end of our street. He'd march up to people getting out of their cars and tell them not to park there anymore because the ground was compromised. My neighbor Rick called him a lunatic to his face. "You're not the city, Larry. Move your stupid cones or I'm calling the cops." Larry just pulled out his notebook and showed Rick these detailed charts with measurements and dates. "Look at this data. The cracks have grown 3 inches in the past month. There's a void forming underneath." Rick laughed and kicked one of the cones into Larry's yard. "Get a life, old man." That's when Larry really lost it. He started emailing the HOA daily with reports nobody wanted to read. Janet forwarded me one of his messages. It was 8 pages long with pictures, measurements, and technical terms about subsurface analysis and structural integrity concerns. The HOA board held an emergency meeting about Larry's harassment. They decided to send him a formal letter telling him to stop bothering residents with his unqualified engineering opinions. Larry responded by printing 40 copies of a detailed report and putting them in everyone's mailboxes. The cover page said, "Urgent Geological Hazard Assessment," in bold red letters. Most people threw it straight in the trash, but Larry wasn't giving up. He drove to City Hall with a box full of documents and demanded to speak with someone about the street conditions. They bounced him between departments for 3 hours before some junior clerk agreed to take his report. A few weeks later, Larry was back to his morning routine, but now he looked defeated. The measurements continued, but he stopped trying to warn people. He'd just quietly take his notes and pictures while neighbors rolled their eyes. Then came the spring thunderstorms. We'd had heavy rain for 3 days straight when I heard this horrible cracking sound outside. I looked out the window and saw the end of our cul-de-sac literally collapsing into the ground. A massive sinkhole had opened up, easily 15 feet across and 25 feet deep. 2 cars that were parked there fell straight down. If Mrs. Peterson hadn't been running late for work, her car would have been right in that spot. The fire department showed up within minutes, followed by city engineers and news crews. They evacuated 4 houses closest to the sinkhole and roped off the entire area. That's when Larry appeared with his notebook, calmly talking to the lead engineer. He handed over his documentation, and I watched the guy's face change as he flipped through the pages. They spent an hour going through Larry's measurements and photographs. Later that evening, the city engineer knocked on Larry's door. Turns out, Larry had been right about everything. His soil samples showed exactly what had happened, and his measurements tracked the ground movement that led to the collapse. 3 weeks before the sinkhole formed, Larry had driven back to City Hall and cornered a geotechnical inspector in the lobby. He refused to leave until someone reviewed his complete report with soil core samples and detailed analysis. The county did send a team out to investigate. They confirmed Larry's findings and flagged the area as high risk for immediate attention, but the report got buried in bureaucracy and wasn't processed until 2 days after the sinkhole opened. The city had to pay for the damaged cars and temporary housing for displaced families. They also hired Larry as a consulting engineer to survey the rest of the neighborhood.